Hello, everyone. Today I'm sitting here talking with Presley Paras, and Saban is joining us in the background on this one. Uh, and we're going to be talking about his short film that I was able to see at Film Quest this year, A Sweet Tooth. So if you like this sort of stuff, please follow along and share this out. But Presley, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your film?
My name is Presley Paras, and I am the director slash co-writer for A Sweet Tooth. And the project is about an overachieving analyst that will do anything for a promotion until he encounters a hammer-wielding assailant.
Okay. It makes you wonder, how did the title A Sweet Tooth come into play with that premise of a film?
Well, I think it was a conversation that Jason and I had. I think originally we were working off like a hurricane party storyline that he had, but as we talked more and more about the type of story that we wanted to create, we had to base something around the character and the characters in that. And a sweet tooth, I think a lot of the folklore has turned into a child's tale, but I still think it's relevant in today's society, especially one of a capitalistic nature. If you modesty is ignored, and if you get too much of what you want, it's not good for you. So that's sort of the basis for the story, or
So
at
it's
least the
kind of
title in this case.
so it's kind of setting up the theme of the film that you're kind of looking at. Too much of a good thing.
Absolutely. That is
Okay.
great way of putting it.
So you said Jason. Do you want to elaborate
Yeah.
who Jason is?
Yeah, Jason Daly is the co-writer, producer, and editor for the project, and unfortunately, he wasn't at FilmQuest, but he and I had met actually at another film festival, and at Panic Fest, and we just got along and hit it off. And 3 years later, we talked about doing something together, and it was perfect timing for me. I mean, the strike happened, and I felt like I wanted to create something to me that was meaningful, but also very fun.
Okay. So let's kind of jump into what you're saying, meaningful to you. So we've talked before, and I heard this at FilmQuest. There's a lot of kind of underlying tone to what A Sweet Tooth is really about. Um, so you
Yeah,
want to kind of dive into what that is for you?
yeah, and thank you for asking that question. And I think it's sweet too that the very, very core, the very basis is the visibility of Filipino Americans not being seen sort of on in the general landscape. And that was something that I've experienced on a both personal and professional level, and it's something that I've always wanted to explore, within a story, but I also didn't want to make it overly serious, and I didn't want to make it, make a film about waving or be a particular social flag. It was just more about creating a fun story where I can tell part of my own story within that. And I think it came out. It was a nice balance between telling my story as well as telling a story that the audience would enjoy.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I mean it really kind of hit at the festival, and for the people I know that I talk to, for the BIPOC and the LGBT communities, kind of that same feeling of living on the fringe of the general society, and
Yeah.
how frustrating that can be sometimes.
Right, right. And I think I think we all have experienced that in some capacity. And I think there's a relatability element, especially, most of us have work jobs that we may not enjoy, or work with people that may not value us. And I think that is important that relatability is important. And so by creating a story that entertains, I hope they can understand at least part of my own story.
Yeah. Okay, so when making this film, I'm sure that was one struggle, was kind of dealing with your own issues there. But in the actual filming process, what would you say was one of the struggles that you'd like to share, that you feel like it was hard but you overcame?
I think like all filmmakers, there's always going to be some sort of like production issue that happens. And we actually had a location fall through 2 weeks before the shoot. and so we had to shift, we had to shift. Unfortunately, the good thing is we had scouted another location, but it wasn't our favorite. But that we ended up settling for that location, and we ended up making it work for the movie. But that was definitely a challenge, having to tell the crew and the cast to be like, we're no longer shooting in LA, we're shooting in Orange County, which is an hour and a half drive depending on where you're driving from. And we knew that was challenging. We had lost an audio person, and we had to shift to find someone else. um that was a challenge in itself, and having to rework, some of the storyboards and the shot list in order to, and in an actual story and the blocking to fit the new place, was a challenge. But fortunately, I think we were able to give ourselves enough time, 4 days, to shoot this project. And even though the last day went insanely long, it went to like 17 hours, we made it work.
Yeah. So I want now kind of flipping it. What was something about the shoot that you really enjoyed? Something that just went, yes, this is great.
What I enjoyed about the shoot was the performances. Such a, left turn after left turn movie, and it's really easy to sort of get lost, and to lose sort of the essence of the film. But the performances truly kept it together, and kept the story grounded. And um, while the story is fun, and while it's absurd, and at times outrageous, the performance is what sort of kept it grounded and kept it believable, and kept it, at least for me, when shooting, directing it and shooting it, I was like, it kept me engaged and kept me motivated to be like, okay, we need to stay here, and we need to keep going here, and we need to go down this rabbit hole.
So, A Sweet Tooth was very well, contained within itself as a story. But do you have any type of prospect of broadening that universe or that story into anything else?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like a sweet tooth is something that we would, Jason and I spoke recently about it, and it's something that's on the back of our mind, but it definitely would lead into sort of that climactic moment of being at their boss's house, and being in a situation where they can't leave their boss's house. And so everything up until leading into that, there's a lot of ways to build, more characters. In this case, Ty's the only person staying there, but in future projects, in the future larger project, there'd be other characters in there as well.
Okay. So taking and building more of the backstory and using this more as the climatic element of the final.
Exactly, yeah.
All right. So now is that something you're working on next, or do you have another project that you're kind of looking at as you kind of flesh that one out?
Yeah, that one's being worked on. I have another project, involving, my own Filipino American experiences, and then there is also another sci-fi project that's in the early stages, that I'm working on. But it's about, it deals with the idea of, being able to transfer your mind into another body, and so we'll see where that goes.
Okay. Sounds like an interesting one. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't want to say too much because I'm actually reading a book right now for review that's one of the aspects that happens that some of the villainous characters can do.
Oh, wow. Wow, that
Yes.
sounds interesting. I'd be
Yeah.
interested in finding out what that's about.
Okay. So we know what that's going on and you got that going on. But now let's jumping back to A Sweet Tooth. Right now it's in the film festivals.
Yeah.
Is it just starting its run? Is it near the end? I mean, basically what I'm asking is if somebody wanted to see this, where would they go?
Well, it's it's still in the beginning of its run. I chose Film Quest as the starting point because, as you and Saban, I'm sure, are aware, Film Quest is an amazing, lovely festival, and I have a great time every year that I go. But it started off there, and then it premiered in LA at, the Philam Creative Film Festival, and so we're just waiting on, festivals to come back. But so far, two for two. Obviously, we know those numbers probably won't hold. I mean, to be realistic, but, we're still early on. So for those out there, you'll have to wait a little bit and be patient. But, it's definitely going to come near a city near you. Ideally, maybe in, San Francisco or, LA.
Okay, so kind of just keep an eye out on the festivals around where you live and see if you can see it come up. It's
Yeah,
a good little horror twisted film. I'll give it that. Because
yeah,
like you were saying, without giving too much away, it's that person that finally reads that point of just what do I do? And kind of
right.
clicks a little bit. Uh,
Yeah,
so-
someone defined it as a Korean movie with all the left turns, and I was okay with that.
okay, I can kind of see that with the constant little jolts to the side. So
Yeah.
let's come back to just you now. Now here you are, you've written this one, and we were talking earlier before we started recording, and I saw a few years back you did one of Trout and Buffalo, which was a very different style of film, much more mental aspects going on in
Yeah.
that one. So with these two different styles, what you've talked about, you've been working on, where does Presley get inspiration for what he's writing and working on?
Well, it's a lot of recreational drugs, Dan. No joking.
Well, you are in
No,
California, it's legal, right?
y- this is very true. This is very true. No, I think like any artist or any creative person, I think you or you should in this case is just find stories that sort of resonate with you, and there's like some ideas like that's like when someone passes them by you, you're like in this case, at least for a Sweet Tooth, it was one of those ideas where it was like a hurricane party, and I'm like, okay, I can see something there, but it took having to put ties, my lead character in there to really shift the story, and it became it no longer was a hurricane party story. It became watching his boss's house story. But and even in regards to Buffalo and Trout, I was always enamored with the idea of just two criminals just making a living, and of theft. But I didn't want to have like a trauma story, and nor did I, nor did I want it to seem cool to be doing the things they were doing. And I wanted to create the perspective, inside looking out versus outside looking in. And I think that I still had that story, with me for a long time until I realized a couple of years ago that they should just be two women, and and it should be their relationship, and just their friendship, and it's about that. And I think that's when the story itself sort of inspired me enough to be like, okay, like let's go write this and shoot this.
Okay, so from what it sounds like you're saying, it's really comes down to when you settle on who the character or characters are
Yeah,
for your story.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. When I can see a character um in them, that's when the story can click. And yeah, Dan, you're like a film therapist here. I mean, like I I understand part of what I do, but now you're helping me understand. I'm like, yeah, that's right. When we have great characters, that it clicks, and it does for me at least. I can't speak for everyone else, but that's my process.
Okay, so that's pretty good. So kind of shifting and kind of some other things. If you had a dream project or a dream character to work with, what would you like to do in the future?
Dan, you're challenging my own landscape, creative, mental, emotional.
Good.
You know, I've always wanted to do, I love, not to say I would love to do this type, like to do this movie, but I think this style of movie where it's so expansive, it crosses time, but like Space Odyssey 2001, I think I
Okay.
would love to do a project on that scale. Um, and to do a story that it just crosses millennials of time, and still be able to tell a coherent like narrative. And I think that would there's something just so I think there's something so like when we as human beings look at ourselves and our place in this world, I think it's nice to see it from a perspective that we have this short time, and this and in a tight window, so we make the most of it. And I just find those films, to me, that's inspiring, and that's beautiful. um I know some people can look upon that a little bit differently, but I I think it just creates such an emotion for me and a feeling. So um to do something of that scale or something similar, that would be amazing.
Okay. So,
Also, it costs a lot.
well, like I say, it's the dream one you out there. So,
Right.
kind of going with that, you're saying 2001 was kind of, so I take it 2001 was probably one of your inspirations to become a filmmaker.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, definitely. 100%. Yeah.
so what are some other films that kind of hit you and said, that's what I want to do?
One it's going to sound strange, and maybe it's not on most people's like list, but the Sci-Fi Channel's version of Dune, the miniseries,
Yeah.
was just such a fascinating piece to me. I know it came out, I think, like 20 years ago. And I know it's a little bit older, but it's just something that, it's I think it's like 6 hour long episodes, but it's just I've never seen a sci-fi movie that's done in the future just sort of take these huge risks and and still feel like a grounded story. And I thought that it just really like inspire. I remember there's a moment where they just had they were focused on one character, and the camera was Dutch, and then they followed him, but then the camera went Dutch with the character towards the other end, and it was just such a subtle but small move, but grounded in the choice of, like, this entire world is uneasy, that moment I was like, I want to do something, like I want to elicit a feeling, that same feeling for others. Like if I can do that, that would be amazing and extraordinary. So yeah, yeah. And honestly, I do still think it's better than the most recent version of Dune, but that's just me. I'm probably in the small group of people that think that.
No, I can see the differences because I'm an old Dune fan. I read the books years and years ago,
Yeah.
watched the original, watched the miniseries. So I'm with you
Yeah.
there. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Okay. See, there we
each
go.
each one of them has their own unique take, just like anytime you see a remake, it's everybody's going to put their own taste on it.
Yeah. Yes. No, absolutely. Well, that's why we're kindred spirits.
Yeah. So what you're telling me and what I'm hearing is you really like science fiction.
Yeah. I think, I think there's something to science fiction that allows us to explore like deeper concepts, but also like deeper emotional aspects to who we are as people, while still giving us a story that is like, that still entertains us and that still wants to make us watch. And I think sci-fi and is that genre that that does that for us. And there's so many, and there's so many other references of other types of sci-fi projects out there that like, Star Wars is the biggest example, I think, where there's such a science fiction element to it, but it inspires us. And I think sci-fi allows us to explore that.
Okay. So I guess we could kind of maybe look forward to seeing some sci-fi work from
Yeah, I think it's in the
you.
cards. I mean, I know it requires a budget, but if I can, get enough and do something that's meaningful, absolutely, that's impactful, but still great, I would absolutely love to take that, you know, take up that challenge.
Okay. So, kind of moving along now, talking about yourself, we've got what your inspiration was, kind of what you're going moving forward on, what you'd like to do, um, what your kind of your next project, but kind of going a little bit different. If you had someone come up to you and say, "Hey, look, I want to become a filmmaker," what advice would you give them as a new person into the industry?
Hmm. Yeah, that's obviously everyone's everyone starts at a different place. But I would say make something. I mean, it's so generic and contrived, but I think that's probably the best answer. Like, you're going to get the quickest and fastest answer as a filmmaker if it's something that's for you. And more importantly, if it is, it'll answer other questions by you completing a project to be like, I need to do more of this, or I need to do more of that, or I need to meet, these types of people, or instead of a serious drama. I want to go, do a sci-fi movie. Like I think creating, as an artist, when you're creating something, um, experience is really the best way of getting your answers and adding clarity to your own process. So any new filmmaker, I mean, it's just so easy now to create something, and you don't have to create, a feature film or a mini series. I mean, Film Quest is great about featuring 2-minute shorts that are just so, they're such a palate cleanser, but so engaging and entertaining. I think it starts from there, and yeah, I think start small and see where it goes.
Okay. So let's kind of bringing it back around. I had a question lined up about your movie, and then so yeah, I had to
Oh
rethink
yeah,
because you had me thinking about the other things that were happening. Going, oh yeah, I remember this and this.
yeah.
You took me along with you. So back to A Sweet Tooth. After people watch it, what would you say is something, the one thing, maybe top thing, or a few top things, something up there that you would like them to take away from your film?
I would like, I mean, ultimately, I would love for them to take the idea that you can cast different people in your roles, and it won't, and I don't think you need to necessarily make it about the type of people that you're casting per se. That you can just, if it's two people at a bar, and they're best friends, one of them just so happens to be Filipino American, and that has nothing. And that doesn't have to affect the story, but I think it makes for a far more visually interesting story. I think when you have that sort of like visual in your eye. I mean, I think the most recent movie feature out there is Royal House. I mean, it features two young women in just different colors, and they never talk about their background or ethnicity, but I think it gives a different scope and gives a different lens to the story. It makes it a little more interesting on top of already being an interesting story. So yeah, I encourage people to just try different people, and I know we're in this moment of society where I think people feel like they're being forced into a box or being forced to make decisions, and I'm saying you don't have to. Like, maybe just think about it in the future that, hey, this role could be a little more interesting and a little more dynamic if someone from a different background could come in and bring something to your character, to your story. Because let's be honest, having vanilla ice cream all the time isn't is listen, I love vanilla ice cream, but you got to mix it up every now and then.
Okay. That I agree with you on that, because there's a big thing. I don't know if you know, but I actually do reviews of tabletop games, books, and movies. That's so.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah.
all of that, what you're saying there is, it's that depth of character, adding something that doesn't have to be hammered over the head, but just kind of laid out there and just let people think about. I think
Yeah.
that's a great way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from an actor director relationship too. I mean, any writer and any director worth their salt. I mean, you want to, your actors are such a, they're such a well of information that, it would be super interesting to have someone that grew up like they would bring something very different and unique to your role. And it would just be a sliver, but it could, it could just give you that little spice to the movie that you may want or need.
Okay. So we're coming up on about a half an hour into this. So is there anything else that you would like to just kind of throw out there as general statements that you would like to share?
Yeah, I would say, listen, people, go watch movies in theaters. I am buy the Blu-rays. I'm on the Christopher Nolan train. I think streaming is wonderful, but there's absolutely nothing like watching a movie in the company of others. It's just a beautiful thing. I think there's sort of a synergy that's shared among everyone that's there, and I think it allows moments to be grander and moments that may be a little more subtle, um, be more robust in those types of situations. So, support, independent filmmakers, and definitely support the theaters.
Okay. So where would they be able to find you, Presley, if we're out looking on the internet?
Well, I'm on X now. It's at Presley Paras, and Instagram's the same way at Presley Paras, and then adding an underscore at the very end. And yeah, you can find me, in on those two platforms.
Okay, and we'll make sure to add those into the show notes here so people can have that access to them. So that
Yeah.
everybody knows, I'm going to be writing up a review of A Sweet Tooth, which showed this year at FilmQuest 2023. A great little film. Like you're saying, there's a lot of nice little twists in that, some little foreshadowing that kind of gives you that you know where it's going to go. At the same time, you're just like, oh, yes, okay.
Yeah.
So in there, I will be adding a link back to this on YouTube. And then the YouTube, I'll be putting a link over to the other so we can have it all hooked up so everybody can see it. And like I always say, if you like this, please subscribe and share it out so that we can help everybody kind of grow what they're doing in their own art forms. So again, thank you, Presley, for joining me.
Thank you for talking to us lowly indie filmmakers who are just trying to tell original stories.
You bet. Okay.